Um, so once again, we're looking for the menucha of Sir Naim Dangur and Sir Moses Montefiore. We're going to try now to have a quick recap of what is relevant now. We stand a week before the first ramifications of the Tosefet Shvit, as it were. There was a Mishnah, Perek Bet Mishnah Vav, Masel Shvit, that said that had a three-way machloket. Until when can you plant trees? Effectively. And the question was why. So Rashi says because of Tosefet, you need 30 extra days for Tosefet. And the Ritva and the Ramban say that we're worried about the Shmita, you're looking like the first year of the Orla, the 4 years of Orla. That's broadly speaking, that's the Machloket. We showed how this fits into the Gemara in Gittin Daf Nun Gimel, whether you'd have to uproot a tree that you plant later than that time. And if it's Tosefet Shvit, so according to Rashi, nowadays you'd push the whole thing off by 30 days, right? Because we added an extra 30 days. It means you can't have the tree take root within the month of Elul, so you have to stop planting Rosh Chodesh Av, Tu B'Av, depending on the Machloket. But we're concerned about the Ramban and the Ritva, who say that, we're concerned about their opinion. They say that the first year of Orla cannot look like it was Shmita. I can't have the Shmita look like it's the first year of the Orla, and that would not change anything. In other words, that means that the tree would have to take roots prior to Rosh Chodesh Elul, regardless. And that way, the first year of Orla could be counted, right? If you plant a tree this week, you'd count the sixth year as your first year because it took root. Is that the correct term? Okay. Let's see. No, that's not it's not that you have to count. It's not that the Shmita contradicts the Orla. It's that in 3 years, when someone says to you, "Wait, how old is this tree? When can we start eating from it?" You'll say, "Well, Shmita was the first year." Say, well, "Hold on, how can Shmita be the first year?" It sounds wrong. That's it. That's the issue. It sounds wrong, and as the Ramban explains, based on the Gemara in Gittin, because people don't take Shmita seriously, we're very, very machmir about it sounding wrong. If you remember in the first unit, when we talked about the reasons across the centuries, the whole Shmita thing was to different. Many of Gedolei Israel discussed why is Shmita? What does it mean? What is the Sorry about that. We asked why is it all Gedolei Israel spent so much time and ink trying to figure out, explaining why we keep Shmita. You keep Shmita because Hashem said to keep Shmita. Well, right. Part of the issue we said at the time is that Shmita wasn't really kept. So Shmita wasn't really kept. You have to, we take it back to the Beit Midrash. Right. The Shmita becomes much more something that you learn about than something you actually keep. Not only because they were in Galut, because also even Eretz Israel wasn't necessarily kept so seriously. And then Chazal took the counter action, as it describes here in Gemara Gittin, and says if you plant at the wrong time, you have to uproot. What is the wrong time? That was a machloka between the Ramban and Ritva against Rashi, right? According to the Ramban and Ritva, if you plant, and based on the Yerushalmi, we also saw last time, the Yerushalmi, bottom page 12, the Yerushalmi says, just a sec, if you plant within the 30 days before, be a machloket whether you'd have to uproot that tree or not, based on the chashad issue. I'm just explaining why, because you were confused, you were surprised. Sorry, you were surprised, like how can be the chashad is such a serious thing? What if you? I'm sure. 5 minutes ago, I'm sure. Right? How is it that just because it looks bad, so we take it so seriously, you have to uproot the tree? And the answer is, yeah, that's basically what the Yerushalmi there is saying.
So technically, what do we mean by plant? I don't want to make light of this.
Okay.
If one were to take a seed,
yes,
and put it in the ground, that's planting. I would assume most people today buy a tree in a pot.
Very good.
And then they plant it. So, I mean, that tree has an age to it, maybe even a year or two. I don't even know.
Very good. So indeed, let's talk about all the ramifications of this.
I'm assuming nobody.
According to Rashi, right?
I'm assuming nobody plants.
Right.
I don't think it's
so. The way it would work.
Survive. I'm assuming that.
Right. So the ramification of all this would be, let's try to work this out, and then I'll show the Zoom people something and have to just read it out to you out of the computer. Sorry. let's think of all the ramifications of this. If that we have two issues here, right? One's the Orla issue, but Orla does not apply to. What would Orla not apply to?
Non-fruit bearing trees.
So first of all, anything that's not a tree, right? Vegetables. What else?
Not in the ground.
Okay, that's a pot that's disconnected, that's in the home, something like that. Okay, sure. What else doesn't have Orla? Trees that don't bear fruit, flowers, right? But we'd still be concerned about Rashi and say you can't have those things take root during Shmita, right? So if you have, and that means that also 2 weeks before. So let's take Glen's example. Let's say I buy a tree, right? I buy a tree that's open, right? Effectively, open to the ground, and then you plant it in the ground, and you're already in your second year of Orla immediately, right? Because it's been growing for 2 years and has not been disconnected from the ground. So, but it has not been disconnected. Yes, a pod with a hole, exactly. It sits nakuv, right? Right. A pod with a hole open to the ground, or in any other way that it's open. It's not always pots in the mishtala. That's what I'm saying. Okay. That's the idea. Then we wouldn't have the Ramban Ritva's issue because the Shemitah would be the third year of Orla or whatever, right? But we'd still have Rashi's issue. You wouldn't be allowed to do this past Tetvav Elul, right? That's how that would work. So we've been working, and I was hoping I can share it tonight, but it looks like we can only share it at the end of tomorrow. And that's
trees and everything here. They buy it from pots with holes in the bottom. Is that generally like the norm there? Or?
In many places, yes.
So
Yes. In many, yeah.
As long to be able to take the fruit.
Ooh.
Right. Many places that would be. Are you seeing this? What do you see, Baruch?
Yeah.
Okay. So
We see an English guide to garden maintenance on and leading up to Shmita.
Right. So this is a guide to garden maintenance on and leading up to Shmita. Bezrat Hashem will come out tomorrow. I was trying to push to get it in time for Shiur.
Down
So
on the
send it to you
page,
guys today.
we see planting trees and seeds right before Shmita.
So I've been working on this for the past month or so. And there's always the editing, and I was hoping I can hand it out physically this evening, but it hasn't. The final graphic touches haven't been approved yet, because the graphic designer was in the test today. So, but I'm showing just on the Zoom. I'm showing an illegal copy. So. As you can see on the Zoom, we have before Shmita, we have here that in the time, and one of the things you can see is that all the footnotes, one thing is that, happy to have that there, but the footnotes are all reference Morena pages. All the footnotes are to Morena pages. That's the idea here. So first, before Shmita, I point out that in time Beit Mikdash, Tosefet Shvit started. We had Tosefet Shvit. Nowadays, you don't have Tosefet Shvit as long as we don't have a Mikdash. Of course, we have to really change that within the next couple of days, because otherwise we have to fast on, let's say, Shabbos. So guys, get to work, seriously. Then planting trees and seeds right before Shmita. So the two prohibitions concerning planting trees and seeds right before Shmita. Number one may not plant fruit trees. So the first year of their Orla will be the Shmita year, as we saw from the Ramban and the Ritva. Number two, one may not time planting so that the first roots will form during Shmita itself. So it'll take root during the beginning of Shmita. What are the ramifications of this? Number one, fruit trees must be planted by the 15th of Av, as we said, right? Because of the Orla issue. By the 15th, including, because 44 days take us to Zayin.
The first year of Orla would be
the sixth year, if you, yes, correct. Now, trees that do not bear edible fruit and bushes can be planted until the 15th of Elul, right? Because they have to take root before Shemitah still. Flowers can be planted until the 26th of Elul, because they were worried about 3 days of taking root. if the plant has already formed proper roots and maybe planted any time before Rosh Hashanah, as you pointed out. Therefore, a tree or bush potted in soil whose pot has opening of at least 2 centimeters wide, so the soil is exposed to the ground, can be planted until Erev Rosh Hashanah. Right? Now, one more point that we didn't go into here, and we're not going to go into right now, is the issue. There are 2 more issues that need to be pointed out, just more broadly. One has to do with vegetables. Right? You pointed out vegetables, if I don't have arla, so that should be less of a problem, correct? There still might be the root issue, right? It's how long to take a bush and different bushes. So that's, some will take 3 days, some will take 2 weeks. So that would depend on what kind of bush. We're talking about a proper bush, or we're talking about a seed, right? Beseder. That now, but there's another issue, which is sfichin, which we did not get to at all yet. That's not even in this. So one issue that we can't really address. So just what we had here is what we learned right last time, the Ramban, Ritva, and Rashi. Well, you see that sometimes I also talk about halacha l'maaseh. Happens even to me. So, now, just
we're only talking about planting, not talking about watering.
Right. So I'll address that in a moment. Correct.
I'll address weed as well, right?
Weeds. When you say weeds,
Yeah,
what do you mean by weed? Yeah.
So
Yeah, of course.
most of it's on hydroponics, so it's probably all
Yeah. No, there's a very important question because of the question of utilization of whatever grows on Shmita, right? You have to utilize to its utmost. So we have to discuss what is the best utilization of weeds. It's not, it's smoking it or something else. I don't know. Maybe you need to try a few different options. Anyway, 2 other points that we did not discuss but we need to be aware of. One is the vegetable issue of what vegetables are allowed to be eaten during Shemitah in terms of sfichin. At what point? So we haven't learned the sugya yet. It's a sugya in itself. Chazal asered vegetables that grow during Shemitah, that are grown during Shemitah. It's a whole sugya we're gonna have to get into later on. That's number one. Another issue, which is a bit of the asered eating. Now, because that would depend on at what point was the plant planted. What?
Planting, of course.
No. So I'm saying if you plant before Shmita and it takes root during Shmita, does that change the deen? So there's a whole issue there that just to be aware of. We can't go into it right now because we haven't learned the sugya properly, but just to be aware of that. One more thing to be aware of is grass, not that kind of grass. Thank you. When you first plant grass, you need to mow the grass a lot in order to make it expand. I was not aware of this, but I talked to some people who know about these things and they say this is true. Now, usually why do you mow your lawn? And you're in Israel, you don't have a lawn, but it solves most of the problem. But why do people mow their lawns? Why? Because it looks nice, right? In other words, you don't mow the lawn, so it's not part of lotismo, right? Lotismo means cutting it down in order to help it expand better, make it better expand. So you're allowed to mow your lawn during Shemitah regularly. Adrabah, it's worse to let it grow out, because when it grows out, then you have to save the grass. Then you'd have to mow it in order to help save the grass, right? As opposed to if you're just making it nice all the time, that's okay. So it's better to mow the lawn more frequently. What? Oh, okay, very good. Yes. Good, right. Those in Israel who have grass. But the ramification of pre-Shmita, planting grass now would be a problem, because when you mow grass at the beginning of its growth, when it starts growing, you mow grass. You have to help it spread out, and that would be usher, because I was not aware of this either. I've been reading the books, and that's what they say. So if you're allowed to mow your grass regularly during Shemitah, but you can't plant the grass beginning next week already. If you want to plant any new grass and new lawns, it's not a good time, because then you'd have to mow it at the beginning of Shemitah, and you're causing yourself. That's a self lifnei iver, right? You're causing yourself having to mow it at that time. So those are the main ramifications of that. I just want